Okay, so I've got a lot of, we've got 20 minutes. So I apologize if I talk relatively quickly. I'll try and make it as clear as possible. So first of all, Atomico, we're a VC firm. We've invested in a few game companies that you might know. One of them is Supercell, the other one is Rovio. More recently, we've invested also in Bossa Studios here in London. We've also invested in a company in Iceland called Teatime. And our more recent investment was a Paris company called OhBiBi. And Steven, Matthias, and myself basically do that. I'm also the CEO of eRepublik Labs, so I'm actually a games entrepreneur. So I know relatively well both sides of the table. I've pitched VCs. I've had to raise money. I think I pitched 28 different VCs before one of them said yes. So for me, it's quite interesting to be on the VC side as well now and understand. So I'll try and have as candid as possible a discussion with you guys about what's interesting. Why do VCs, or at least some VCs, see an opportunity in the games market? Well, first of all, because it's a huge market, right? I mean, and mobile's already, this is actually last year's numbers, now it's bigger. It's already $46 billion opportunity. It's still growing fast year on year. You can scale. So it's just really a big market. I'm actually very surprised that so few VCs are looking at this market in a very, especially in Europe. I mean, you've got some excellent early stage VCs. Not that many VCs looking beyond that here in Europe, which is great for us, but not so great for game companies. Another reason is obviously the platforms continue to develop. I mean, you've got incredible distribution if you're doing mobile with Google Play and Apple. That's an amazing opportunity still. On PC, obviously, Steam has been very strong, but you also have some really, really interesting, changes that are happening with, Discord's going to launch a store. You've got obviously Epic that's going to launch a store as well. It's going to be interesting also to see what happens to the revenue shares. Epic has announced, or hasn't, I don't know if they've announced it yet, but definitely they will take a smaller cut from what we understand. So there's a lot of movement there. Obviously, Facebook and other companies are doing, lots of efforts in terms of the instant messaging side of things. So there's going to be a lot of change with the platforms, I think, over the next, year or two. And when you're saying change, you mean opportunity. So it's an interesting time right now. Other thing is to make money. Games actually is a liquid market. There's a lot of exits. Actually, you'll see there's more exits in the games market in terms of proportion than other technology investments. And these range from $25 million or below to up to $10 billion if you look at the Supercell exit. And recent exits are King, Supercell, obviously SpaceSafe that got acquired by Supercell. My own company was that I exited a year and a half ago. So lots of action, lots of buyers also in the market, which is interesting. The company that acquired me, Stillfront, where I still work, for example, making several acquisitions just last year. So it is a very dynamic market right now. Very fast returns. Actually, this is some information I think we got from Goldman Sachs that is showing you that basically the mass consumer adoption that you're getting around games means that you can really get that famous mythical 10x that every VC is looking for much faster in games than in other technology investments. And kind of interesting part. Another point which actually took a long time for me to explain to investors, especially now, is that it's very cash efficient. Game companies are not like other tech companies. The moment they start working and have a game that's working, they actually make profits, which for some VCs is kind of like, what? What do we do with that? The good news is that if you get the right ones and invest in the right game companies, you don't have to do a lot of funding rounds, which means as an entrepreneur, you can actually keep quite a significant stake in your company. And as a VC as well, if you get in relatively early or at the right time, you can actually get a pretty nice stake in the company. So it's great for angel investors. It's great for early stage VCs. It's great also for VCs that come in at Series A, maybe Series B, but you don't see a lot of Series C, D, and so forth in games, at least not in mobile games. So that's a really interesting side of it. And then obviously, phenomenal revenue growth when you get it right. I mean, this is a graph for Supercell, but you can see the same graph for companies like Playrix. You can see definitely for Epic with Fortnite more recently. I mean, when you hit it right, when you hit it on the nail, the returns are just amazing. So that's what makes it interesting. It's difficult, it's harder, but it's definitely still doable. And then the thing I personally love and like is longevity. This kind of old talk about games is a hit-driven business, and then you're only as good as your last hit. Yes, but then if your hit lasts 20 years, who cares? You can really, really do very well there, and you can see like these franchises, have many, many years of revenues, and this is all the live operations discussion and all that. And the other thing that we really like as VCs is when you look at a team and they've already had one success, normally that team is better able now to create multiple successes, and their hit rate just gets better. So that's another thing that we like, obviously. And then Europe's great. There's very deep European talent in Europe. This is not a situation where basically, US is much better than Europe, or even China is much better than Europe. Europe is very, very good. You've had amazing returns here, and you have incredible companies. And you have a real deep pool of talent. You had some great PC game companies that were here. A lot of people who were working for these companies then worked for mobile and that sort of stuff. So you've got teams with lots of experience. And it's a unicorn factory. What is better than a unicorn factory, And here we're missing a few. Paradox should be in here, but you've got King, Mojang. We'll say Israel's part of Europe, so Playtika. So you definitely have a lot of game unicorns that have come from Europe. You even have decacorns like Supercell. So that's another interesting thing here. So what does Atomico do? That's a bit different. And if you're interested, there's a video of Hilka, who's the CEO of Supercell, talking about how Atomico helps Supercell basically scale, grow into Asia, and do a few things there. Basically, we have a growth acceleration team. I'm part of that growth acceleration team of people that basically have done it before. I've experienced in games, and we're basically able to kind of help you out with some of the strategic kind of issues that you might have as you're trying to scale your business internationally. Also, obviously, the network that we have is kind of helpful. And up to now, we have a pretty okay track record in terms of game investments. So if we're looking at you, at your company, and then that probably means that we saw something really special in you. And then the other thing that we find really amazing in games, and that I think is kind of underplayed, is kind of the incredible audience reach that games have now, especially with mobile. I mean, there's something like 2.2 billion active gamers out there are spending. And that's also, of course, free-to-play has brought a lot more consumers to it. So that's another thing that we like. Other powerful kind of things that we look at and we like is the scalability. That is just huge. I mean, you can basically, now with the help of the stores, you can be a small team. In our case, we had most of the biggest studio in Romania, and our number one market, 50% of our revenues were in the US. You can basically, the world is your playground, which is amazing. Rollout speed, of course, is also amazing. Although we're seeing that with the better games, the rollout speeds are getting a bit slower. You're seeing games staying in what we call early access or soft launch much longer. But still, you can still kind of roll out really quickly once you've got those KPIs doing. Another really interesting thing is the engagement potential. People are playing games more and more and more. They're spending more hours playing games. So that's kind of really another thing that's kind of showing that the market's still going in the right direction. Now, obviously, monetization. We're seeing more and more ways to monetize your games. Free-to-play is not an end of all things. It's a business model. And there's other and new ways that are emerging of doing free-to-play. And so we're really seeing kind of, a lot of things happening. Obviously, Apple now pushing subscriptions very strongly again, which is kind of an interesting way. But basically, this flux that is interesting. And then the other thing that's amazing is the margins. I mean, we keep complaining that we're giving 30% to the Google App Store, the iOS App Store, and all this sort of stuff. But we're forgetting that, before Google and Apple came here, mobile, the operators were keeping 70% of the revenues and leaving 30% to the developers. So actually, although the marketing costs are going up and all that, the margin in games are still really, really good. I mean, at Stillfront, we're a quoted company, so it's pretty clear, and we've publicly kind of say that our goal is to stay at 30% EBITDA. Not many businesses at scale can achieve that sort of EBIT. And obviously, other companies such as Supercell have even higher EBIT numbers. So that's another great thing. One thing that VCs definitely love is that it's highly data-driven because, we're whole pussies and we're afraid of making a mistake, especially because we're managing other people's money. So the more data you have, the easier it is for you to make an investment decision. And you know what? Games were very good at data, at least the right teams are. You know really well. You can pretty well predict a lot of things, and we have kind of all these kind of phase launches that we do and then sort of live operations, all that. So it's pretty easy to read how something is doing. And then what we're seeing is, there's a lot of competition. Maybe the downside is depending on who you read, is between 1,500 games and more that are being launched every day. To be honest, a lot of that is crap and copycats and cheap knockoffs. I actually think that there's maybe a lot less proper games being launched every week, but still, it is a super competitive environment. So that's another characteristic, and that's kind of not changing. So what do we look at as VCs? Obviously, we'll look at metrics. It's very hard for us to not invest in metrics, but I was saying that not all metrics are created equal. It really depends on what your game is like. And even within genres, like for example the casual genre, you can't just say, oh, if you've got a casual game, your KPIs must be 60% plus day one retention and so forth, and this is the monetization, because it's bullshit. It's not true. It completely changes depending on whether you're a super casual game or you're kind of a Candy Crush tab casual game. So it's not as simple as that. The one metric I tend to really kind of believe in is, one is kind of the seductiveness of your game, and the other thing is obviously, is your LTV bigger than your cost of acquisition. That's the kind of key metrics that probably true across the line. So again, same thing in mid-core, you'll have different drawers and all that. So don't pay too much attention to people that will tell you this have in terms of retention number, in terms of ARPDAU and all that. For your game to be investable or successful, because it really depends on what kind of game that you're doing and what kind of target market you have. To me, the most important thing, more important than metrics, is teams. They're really, really critical. What I try and look at is obviously, people who are passionate about doing games, not just tourists. Games industry, there's a lot of tourists still. And then the thing I look at, and I always go into a studio before we make an investment, is there some sort of telepathic kind of thing going on? I mean, do these people work so closely together they don't even need to speak to understand each other? Because that's, I think, what kind of sets things aside. And obviously, that only happens when you have a long history of working together. And we have some things that we look at to judge founders internally. We look at a set of criteria. Is that founder what we call a talent magnet and culture builder? Because you could be a great team that can be a great lifestyle business, but if you really want to scale to become, to have Supercell-like results, you need to have something special in there, and we try to find out what that is. Talent. Is super key. Is that team great at gathering and understanding metrics? Can they make the right tech choices in terms of to enable scaling? Do you have fast design and QA cycles? Do they do weekly sprints? Or are they just a disorganized mess? That's all things that obviously we look at. But we look for creative risk takers. It's very easy right now to just basically do just a slight Now, we have this thing where you say, standing on the shoulders of giants, which is really, copying someone and hoping for the best and trying to do better performance marketing. It's very important to also have teams. I think the harder thing is very often you find teams that are very good at running a metrics kind of based business and teams that are very good at being very creative. You don't very often have teams that can do both things really well. And that's something that we really look at. So to conclude, and looks like I'm going to be able to do that on time, which is, given this was done for more times, that's great. So one thing that we always look for as a VC is what we call defensive moats. How defendable is your business? And the great thing in gaming is when you start winning big, you can create some really powerful defense. So that's kind of really interesting because you've got the economies of scale. We know it in terms of performance marketing. If you've got a better ARPDAU and better means you can kind of price people out of the equation. So there's a lot of really cool, interesting things that you can do. Another thing is success attracts success. If you are a very successful studio that has a game that's played by millions of people, the best artists, the best designers, the best programmers will want to work for you. So that's another defensive mode. So you've got talent defensive modes. You've got marketing defensive modes. You have a lot of really interesting things that you can build up to build those great valuations. And why you do this, what you're doing is really, although I just said before that games are extremely competitive, really, it's really the top guys really take most of the value there because you're sucking the oxygen out of the smaller ones. It's not great if you're one of the small guys, but if you're one of the big guys and you're a VC that's invested in them, that's pretty good. It's a tough business. That's it. That's all I have for you. I was able to go through it. Thank you. Do I have a minute for questions?
Yeah, I've got time for one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Have you invested in publishers or thought of investing in publishers in general, not like only developers?
So I'm going to give an unpopular answer if you're a publisher. I do not believe in publishers. I do not think that it's a good model for, definitely not for free-to-play. And I think that right now, the kind of game team that have the potential to become billion-dollar companies or more, they need to control the whole chain. They need to be able to really control everything, and they need to be good at doing the games, running the metrics. They need to have the marketing team. They need to be the full package. If they're not the full package, it doesn't mean they're bad. I'm just saying they're not VC material.